Hey guys, Mulligan here, and welcome to the next part of my Omens of the Past card review. We continue with the multi-factions, and we're getting into Argenport this time. Before we get started, for those that didn't watch my previous videos, I will only be talking about the cards as far as viability for ranked play. If the card isn't viable for ranked play at all, then I will try to touch on its draft viability. Also, I won't be talking about the banner cards, since even though you couldn't get them out of empty throne packs, they were still part of the previous metagame as set 0 cards. You just had to craft them. But let's get into it. First card we'll be talking about is Orc Bully, a 2-power 3/2 unit requiring 1 Justice and 1 Shadow Influence to play. Orc Bully has +1/+1 while wielding a weapon. Solid 2-drop that can easily see constructed play in my opinion. Obviously this will only really be good in a deck with a weapons focus or just a Minotaur tribal deck. The good thing is that Argenport can function similarly to Rakano as far as an aggro deck is concerned. I haven't run into anyone playing this card yet, but Argenport isn't super popular currently, while it seems like everyone and their brother is playing Praxis midrange. This is something you definitely have to consider depending on the style of aggro or mid-range deck you're running. It gets even better for draft in my opinion because this is at its worst an Argenport soldier who is a perfectly serviceable 2-drop in draft. The next card is Orc Vigilante, a 2-power 1/1 unit requiring 1 Justice and 1 Shadow Influence to play. She has Revenge. When Orc Vigilante attacks, she gets +1 strength. So I looked at this card in my first preview video, and this was actually the card that introduced the revenge mechanic. But my thoughts haven't changed much. I've warmed up to it a little bit, because there is probably a revenge deck that is decent where this card would fit in. But I still can't get past the fact that this is so similar to Bladekin Apprentice and Fire, and that hasn't seen serious play in Constructed. I think she's serviceable overall, thanks to the revenge, meaning she can chump block with the potential to come back if nothing else. Though obviously her value isn't attacking. She's not amazing by any means, though, and there are other 2-drops I'd still rather consider before this. In draft, she's probably fine, especially if you need more 2-drops, but I haven't seen her get picked or played, although she is considered by many. Next, we have Bartholow the Seducer, a 3-power 2/2 unit requiring 2 Justice and 1 Shadow Influence to play. He has Unblockable and Aegis and an ultimate where you pay 10 to draw a relic of your choice from your deck. Got a lot to say on this one. I will admit that initially I wasn't that hyped about this card. I'm pretty sure I got jaded by the stat line. Lithrai Nightblade has the same stats and is also unblockable, and that doesn't get played in Constructed. I was more interested in the ultimate, but I've changed my tune since then. What's funny is that initially, other people were very hyped for this card and are now disappointed by it. The Aegis and Unblockable combined are what obviously make this card good. I talked about Direwolf adding Reach to Argenport in different ways in a previous Omens video, and this is another way of doing it for Argenport aggro. This is another 3-drop that you can suit up on turn 4 with Hammer of Might. Some said this would complement Silverwing Familiar in a deck like that, but I honestly thought Bartholow would replace it, since you might not have the deck slots to run both. And so far that has been the case from what I've seen. Bartholow is very tough to interact with by traditional means, but like many Aegis units, he folds to relic weapons from Armory. Speaking of which, as far as other decks, I still wonder if this could actually be good in Armory. This is probably the brewer in me talking, but I could see Armory getting to 10 power to use the ultimate to grab a relic weapon. It wouldn't be easy though, and the bigger issue is that Armory is still a very tight list at the moment. I doubt they have the room to fit 4 copies of Bartholow. The heavy influence requirement kind of shoehorns it into either one of those 2 decks that I mentioned, but there was a deck that ran Bartholow with Rakano Plate in an ETS tournament. Hopefully people will come back around to this card like I did. The next card is Bloodletter, a 3-power, 3/2 weapon, requiring 1 Justice and 1 Shadow Influence to play. When you equip this on a unit, the wielder gets lifesteal this turn. Cool art, cool card name. But I'm skeptical on this finding its way into a constructed deck. I'd imagine that Argenport decks that are focused on putting weapons on units would rather be doing other things on turn 3. Don't get me wrong, this giving lifesteal is good. But there's just so much competition, at least when it comes to other 3-cost cards. Developing a unit with Silverwing Familiar, Spirit Guide, or Bartholow probably takes priority over this. Even if you want your turn 3 to focus on putting a weapon on a 2-drop, this still faces competition even from Copperhall Cudgel, in my opinion. A great synergy with the Orc Bully we mentioned earlier. I just don't know if decks will have the slots to fit this in. In draft, like many other weapons, this is fine, depending on if it complements your deck, meaning you have a lot of 2-drops. The next card is Slay, a 3-power spell requiring 1 Justice and 1 Shadow Influence to play. Kill a unit. Most players will say this is the best spot removal in the game, without question. And for the most part, I agree. You will generally want to use this against higher cost units, and Vanquish does get nearly everything you would want to kill with Slay. The extra flexibility of killing whatever I want in exchange for paying 1 more power is very appealing to me though, and I haven't felt the drawback of paying that extra power yet for running this over Vanquish. This is not strictly better than Vanquish, but it's very, very close in my opinion. In draft, this is a snap pick if you're in Argenport. Spot removal, it doesn't get any better than this in that format. The next card we have is Champion of Vengeance, a 4-power 3/3 unit requiring 1 Justice and 1 Shadow Influence to play. If you have 4 Influence, she is invulnerable to damage during your turn. If you have 4 Shadow Influence, when Champion of Vengeance attacks, she gets +2 strength. I haven't seen this played at all in Constructed so far because most people feel it's one of the worst champions in the game. It's understandable since both abilities aren't very good. The only card where invulnerability has actually been good in Eternal is with Auric Runehammer, and it being a relic weapon has a lot to do with that. Now, this is the cheapest unit we've gotten with this ability so far, though. But a souped-up Combre Magister, a card that sees fringe play in draft, probably still doesn't make this good enough. I'm holding out hope that this could still find a way into an Argenport mid-range brew, but that hope is fading. I could see this being better in draft, where removal is tougher to come by, and the format is more about unit combat than Constructed is. The next card is Sanguine Sword, a 4-power 2/2 relic weapon, requiring 1 Justice and 1 Shadow Influence to play. When this comes into play, you may sacrifice a unit to give Sanguine Sword +2/+2. I was initially hyped for this card when I first saw it, but it hasn't seen play at all in Constructed so far. If my experiments with Argenport mid-range decks that focus on the Void are any indication, this card will not end up being very good. Argenport can't recur stuff consistently enough to mitigate the cost of buffing this, in my opinion. That and a 4/4 relic weapon that costs the same as Auric Runehammer but doesn't make you immune to damage on the first swing isn't impressive. This is also a tough sell in draft. It's a worse duelist blade for Argenport, in my opinion, since you will not want to give up units in most cases. A 2/2 relic weapon isn't absolutely terrible, but I'll wish I picked up that life drinker I skipped earlier if I end up with this. The next card is Stone Powder Alchemist, a 4-power 2/2 unit requiring 1 Justice and 1 Shadow Influence to play. He has Lifesteal and Revenge, and when he comes into play, you deal 2 damage to the enemy player. So I looked at this in my third preview video, where I thought it had potential in Constructed, but once again, that was in the context of not knowing the entire set, since I felt the card needed help back then. Fast forward to now, and the only deck this has seen play in is a cute Fire Justice Shadow build with Stone Shakers to make this a 2-cost card to get back with Memory Dredger. The deck was cool to watch, but it still hasn't picked up steam. The stat line combined with the low impact ability are what make this card underwhelming on its own, and is why players have avoided it. I feel like you have to draw this back after Revenge for it to matter at all, and even then it doesn't do enough. The same story for Draft, unfortunately. I'd much rather have a Stone Scar Magus than this. The next card is Streetwise Informant, a 4-power 1/4 unit requiring 1 Justice and 1 Shadow Influence to play. He has Endurance and Unblockable, and you can pay 5 to gain 2 armor. The Strength stat isn't nearly high enough for this to see play in Constructed. In Draft, though, this thing is annoying. Even though 1 damage per turn is a very long clock, this still breaks up board stalls. And Endurance with the 4 health makes it even more annoying, since good removal is so scarce in Draft, and you really don't want to use it on this, since there are possibly bigger threats your opponent could have. Not a bad pick if you need some 4-drops in Argenport. Next card is Bereaved Stranger, a 5-power 4/4 unit requiring 1 Justice and 1 Shadow Influence to play. While this is in play, Strangers have Lifesteal. I'm not as impressed by this Stranger as others. This ends up being good if you drop this on the table when your Strangers are already 3/3s or 4/4s. Otherwise, I think the Lifesteal isn't that impactful. This doesn't excite me like Meditator Stranger does, and I'd probably even play Tireless or Savage Stranger over this. As far as Draft, I feel the same way about this as I do the other Strangers. Proceed with caution. Next card is Inquisitor Month, a 5-power 5/5 unit requiring 2 Justice and 2 Shadow Influence to play. He has Flying and Revenge, and Month's Revenge never ends. Do I really need to say anything more? This is another card I looked at in my third preview video, and the hype train was rolling when this got spoiled. And unlike Groundbreaker, the hype was real, and the train is still rolling. This has been everywhere since the set came out. You can find Mokto in most Argenport brews, and pretty much every 3-faction mid-range and control deck running Shadow has been packing 3 to 4 copies of these. There are no signs of Mokto slowing down either. It's just a sticky win condition that demands a silence. Otherwise, prepare to be grinded into dust when this comes into play over and over. And I've seen this come back for Revenge more often than I feel like it should, to be honest. I could see a meta where this isn't as good, but if there was another safe legendary to craft, aside from Chthon in this set, Mokto is it. The next card is Rolands Choice, a 5-power spell requiring 1 Justice and 1 Shadow Influence to play. You can either give one of your units +3/+3, or give enemy units -1/-1. The worst choice card of the 5 in this set, in my opinion. I just don't see the appeal of paying 5 for a slow speed Finest Hour or paying 5 for a Plague Effect. Unplayable in Constructed. I don't even like picking this in Draft, and have found some way to keep it out of my decks so far. It's probably okay in that format, but I just think the card sucks in general. The next card is Breedannouncer, a 5-power 3/3 unit requiring 1 Justice and 1 Shadow Influence to play. He has Flying and Revenge. Unplayable and constructed, unfortunately, thanks to Makto, but this is clearly meant for draft, where this has been pretty annoying for me to face, especially if he has equipment added. 3/3 flyers can be tough to deal with sometimes in draft, especially if they come back if you don't have a silence. I'd say it's a pretty solid pick, depending on what your deck needs. And finally, we have Grinva, Judge of Battles, a 7-power 7/9 unit requiring 3 Justice and 3 Shadow Influence to play. When one of your other units dies, Grinva deals that unit's strength and damage to the enemy player. Yet another card I looked at in my third preview video. Sadly, this hasn't seen serious play in Constructed. It's understandable. Her stat line is amazing for a 7-drop, but she doesn't have an immediate effect when she hits play, and has a target on her back once she does hit the table. She'll be the first thing your opponent will try to take off the board, since her value is gained through your other units. I like that she is both anti-harsh rule for your opponent and benefits from you playing harsh rule. I'm holding out hope that she can find her way into a mid-range type of build, but that deck would probably have to stretch your opponent's removal to the point where they would have no answer for Grinva once she comes down. Even then, she might not get much value if your opponent killed everything else. We'll see how the meta develops. She's a fine bomb in draft if you pick her up. And that is it for the Argenport cards in this set. For those that stuck around to the end, thanks so much for listening to my thoughts. Hopefully you enjoyed the content. If you did, feel free to like the video. If you want to check out more, feel free to look around my channel. There's plenty of Eternal content. So if you don't want to miss future videos, consider subscribing to the channel as well. Anyway, thanks again for taking time out of your day to watch this, and I'll see you all soon. Take care.